Happy Sunday, everybody, and welcome to another Hog Hoops Report. As always, that is Kevin McPherson. I am Jacob Morris. Kevin, we are, 5, 6 months away from the start of the season, but it's beginning to feel a little bit more real. The team moving into campus this week, and again, we still have roster construction questions, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But regardless, the majority of what looks like to be the 25-26 roster moving in, coming in this week. And again, we're still a ways away from this whole season. The team not complete, but things starting to take shape a little bit for the Razorbacks here in May.
Yeah, you get your players on campus Memorial Day weekend. That's a tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Memorial Day being tomorrow, and then the next day is the first day of summer session one classes.
Yeah.
Players going through physicals because they're going to be going through the limited on court stuff and off court. 8 hours per week. We know 4 is for strength and conditioning, 4 hours of on court instruction. And so all that is, literally hours away. Most of the team is expected to be on, I guess the last day they could show up is Monday, Memorial Day, unless they have something worked out with somebody like Carter Knox, who technically hasn't announced his intentions yet. He has till Wednesday the 28th. So in theory, maybe he gets a little extra time. We'll see how everything shakes out for him. But it's not just about moving on to campus. It's like how fast things really start to happen as soon as you get there. It's not like they come in and they're learning how to be a college student or learn the Arkansas ropes for a few weeks before things ramp up. No, it's like the next day. It's summer classes and physicals, and now you're a day away then from getting on the court and doing some real basketball stuff as part of the program. And typically once they get on campus, they're also doing they'll do like they'll have pickup games over there in the performance center. Various pro hogs will come in and out of there. The pro hogs always get back with me, under the table, off the radar, telling me the new hogs, what they look like, what they think. Some of that I get to talk about, some I have to keep to myself. But this is that time. It's right here, and you're like, okay, wait a minute. It wasn't that long ago that the season ended, and that's
Mm-hmm.
true. It just seems like it connects from one part to the next. It's why I always say basketball never sleeps. It's the only sport, in my opinion, that literally 365 days a year and one in a leap year, there's something going on that's relevant with basketball. There just is. And we're seeing it again. It sparks back up on campus anyway with the next team. And look, that's 2.0 for John Calipari at Arkansas. And you mentioned leading into this, maybe the roster's not finished yet. We know there's a couple of, at least one question mark, maybe more. And with John Calipari, the kind of coach that over the years at Kentucky and other places has added players late.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you're getting your roster on campus doesn't mean that that's the end all be all. There's nothing else that's going to shape this next team and this next roster. It just means the bulk of it and what we know now, all converging on Fayetteville, Arkansas here. They've got till tomorrow to make it. So if they're not there now, they'll be there within the next 24 hours.
Hey, you have a favorite on the record or off the record piece of information from the Pro Hogs you've received from way back in the day? You got anything good for us that you can share now?
Uh, you know, probably well, there's probably 2 or 3 things that unless I get a green light, I better not, because I watch my content. They're like, I didn't say that was okay to say. I will tell you this: the Pro Hogs have had really good insight about the guys that we're going to factor in, and guys that maybe they had question marks about. It seems like it kind of plays out relative to what their thoughts are, not precisely, but they have a good feel of the guys that can go and guys that can't. I will say this: just based on his athleticism and prowess playing above the rim, the first reports on Ricky Council were this guy athletically looks like a pro.
Mm.
And some of those guys were like, maybe don't say too much about that. I can't tell you, I won't say who said it, but in general, because they're like, how does that pan out? Well, he
Yeah.
is a pro,
Yeah.
he wasn't drafted, but he got an undrafted free agent deal right away from Philadelphia. He, went from a two-way pretty quickly to actually having a 4-year deal.
Mm-hmm.
He's been in the rotation at times for honestly an organization that struggled with injuries and performance in the last couple of years, but he's making his way into maybe a long-term NBA player, even if it's in a second or third rotation kind of look. But a lot of the pro hogs that got in the gym with him immediately in those early pickup days were like, man, this guy, if he's got the athleticism and the body to be really good at both ends. They thought he
Hmm.
had upside as a defender, an offensive player, those kind of things. And so we saw that play out in his one season at Arkansas where he elevated himself, helped the team get to a Sweet 16. I think he was a leading scorer on that team. But he also helped himself obviously pretty quickly
Yeah.
for an undrafted guy. And when you look at the NBA part of it, so I'd say the Pro Hogs had a sense about one of the next Pro Hogs when they got eyes on him and compete against him up there.
It's interesting the way with certain guys, like you said, he doesn't get drafted, but guys that play the game, you can just tell from an athleticism standpoint, hey, potential wise, here's somebody that could stand out. And Cantle's obviously done pretty well for himself. Speaking of the NBA draft, we got to talk a little bit about the NBA draft withdrawal deadline, what that might mean for Carter Knox and Due Thero. We'll do so after a quick break. All right, back here on the Hog Hoops Report, Kevin McPherson and Jacob Morris with you. Kevin, let's talk that NBA draft withdrawal deadline, May 28th. Obviously, Carter Knox and Adu Thero. That's the focus for the Hog fans right now. And, there was a little bit of smoke with, Matt Norlander came out and said maybe Adu Thero could return. Now it's a little bit, we don't know. But regardless, focus on Carter Knox here. That's obviously a big roster piece for Arkansas. Adu Thero would be a massive bonus as well. But May 28th is going to tell Arkansas fans a lot about what next year's roster is going to look like.
Yeah, Carter Knox has a deadline upcoming if he wants to return to school. The thought has been, based on people I talked that are NBA scouts, the coaching staff, and you look at some of the updated mocks that continue to update as you now pass the combine and getting really close to this deadline. The consensus is Carter Knox is heading back to school. But all it takes is one team, and he's
Mhm.
going through his process, and he still hasn't announced anything. So if he gets something lined up or he gets a guarantee that's to his liking, he won't come back.
Yeah.
Or he might have some teams telling him we'll do this, and it's not to what he thinks it should be. And then he needs to come back and make really good NIL money and be back in the draft in a year's time. So we just don't know yet. I put a percentage on it. I'd say I kind of fluctuate based on the daily nuggets of info I get from my sources. I'm between 85 to 95%
Okay.
that he's coming back. At one point, it was 95 to 99% that he was coming back. So I've lowered that to 85 to 95. Still,
Yeah.
but I'm saying there's a chance he stays in, which is not what Hog fans want to hear in terms of next year's team and roster, because Arkansas really pumped the brakes out of the portal after getting those two big men. They're really
Mhm.
thinking retention, retention, retention. And Carter Knox, Carter Knox, Carter Knox, that's all about you now. You got to, so we're going to find out. So I do think that Thero, there's been some interesting little things said lately, about the maybe there's a chance. I am at that 95 to 99% that he
Yeah.
stays in the draft. I
Yeah.
just don't think it's, and the staff doesn't think, I'm telling you, they don't think, based on my most recent conversation a few days ago, they're not seeing that he's coming back. It doesn't mean that it couldn't land like that if he just can't get quite the kind of guarantee he's looking for. But I think things are probably going well enough in his on course for him to go ahead and stay in and get selected. You see a lot of mocks with early second round, some late.
Mhm.
Again, it's going to boil down to which teams believe in him, who's going to actually take him. But if he stays in, that tells you probably he's gotten at least some kind of guarantee. You look at his range projections, they're very similar to Jalen Williams 3 years ago. Jay Will, when he
Yeah.
really quickly left campus, went out of state to train. He got a draft guarantee before he ever went to the combine. He had one from Oklahoma City. He still went through the combine process. He still did things to help potentially improve his draft stock, but he knew that Oklahoma City was going to take him where they did at 34th, early second round. So Adu Thero, because of the injury, he didn't do a whole lot at the combine. He did the measurements. His pro day with Clutch, they showed video of that, and all you didn't see him doing any drill work in this little cut up video, but you saw him with his shirt off after breaking a sweat. So you don't know what paces they put him through, what he's actually done performance wise. for any team. But the point is that even if he's got some kind of guarantee, it doesn't mean that he's not going to still take part in some things to try to improve that. But also the knees a consideration for maybe why he hasn't done as much.
Mm,
Clutch represents him. And even when they have healthy guys, they don't at the combine, they don't do a whole lot.
yeah.
They just try to kind of keep it to their controlled pro day. So there are some little questions there that make you think, well, maybe there's a chance, but at the end of the day, I think Thero stays in, and again, Knox comes back. That's how I see it right now. Wouldn't nothing shocks me
Mm,
anymore. I'd be strong. I'd be surprised. If Thero comes back and Knox stays in, I'll be over the moon if they both come back. If they both come back, we're talking about a top five going into the season kind of program for Arkansas, top five nationally.
yeah.
And some people talking about being the favorite to win the SEC. I really think that because Arkansas's retention already is really strong relative to the field. Only Purdue has a higher returning minutes percentage on the roster than Arkansas. And it's not a big discrepancy. You get a do Thero back, and you might just win
Mm,
that category in the offseason on a team that went to a Sweet 16, a player or two away from the Elite Eight, and have five players back with all that ability and experience. To me, would put Arkansas in the conversation for the highest preseason ranking in since the previous century.
oh,
Say it that way. I really think that's a possibility. I don't know how much of a possibility is to get Thero back. I already said it. It's very slim to none. But if you did, I think it's a strong possibility. Arkansas's in that handful of teams coming into the season. You're looking at the top five and saying
mm.
is a national title contender.
Wow. Yeah, I think the idea right now, the consensus, like you're saying, is you see Carter Knox make a return, and a Adu Thero would be a bonus of all bonuses. But again, like you said, you just don't know either way in terms of anything can happen. May 28th, again, the deadline. Arkansas fans, all of us, going to be watching that one pretty closely. But Kevin, we got to talk about, there was three guys for Arkansas going through the NBA draft process, and Boogie Flan was a guy, I guess, to this point, right, that everybody seemed pretty sure was going to stay in the NBA draft process, and then enters his name into the transfer portal. It still seems like he's focused on the draft, but brings his name out this week and pretty quickly commits to the defending national champions Florida, stays in the SEC. What was your reaction to that, plain and simple? Him pulling out of the draft and then the decision to join the Gators pretty quickly after the fact.
Well, it's kind of twofold. It's like a gut punch to
Yeah.
send a defending national champion, an SEC foe,
Mm,
the caliber of player that could help them maybe repeat.
yeah.
We haven't seen that at Arkansas in the transfer portal with all the
Mm-mm.
teams and players and the way that you're building rosters now to that. Under Eric Patrick Mulsman, even John Calipari, you just haven't seen that kind of a situation where one of your top guys is going somewhere else. The players that have gone in the portal from Arkansas are players that you're okay departing with. You might
Yeah.
have even helped them go in there. That was the case with Big Z. Arkansas could have retained Zavon Amir,
Mm-hmm.
but he had, whatever NIL raise he had was, corresponded to an increased role, an expectation. Hey, we stay if we get these kind of minutes. And Arkansas wasn't willing to do that. They were okay with making that, going ahead and letting that one go and
Mm-hmm.
getting in the portal and getting one of the two big men that it did. And it's interesting because this is how NBA free agency works. I don't know how many fans realize a lot of NBA free agents, it's not just about the money they're going to get in this contract, but the role they want promised. And you see teams compromise and take they continue to play guys based on the promise and the money
Yeah.
they're paying for it. If it's not really working out, they stick with it anyway. Sometimes you rarely see coaches that'll say, okay, and the GM and everybody agrees, the front office, all right, you're not going to lose your job if, and they do
Mm-hmm.
what's right for the team. But a lot of times, a lot of these things are decided before it ever hits the court. And it's the college game there's some sense of that. Arkansas, I think Calipari, they've done a good job of not overreaching with NIL, staying within valuation ranges. Retention matters, but only to the extent that you can make promises to what a player's role is going to be, and you're comfortable with that helping you win. So I said all that to say there was not a place for a Boogie Fland
Mm,
relative to the qualities he brings. You're going to help. That's insane to say that.
yeah.
You can't use an all-league caliber guy, but his succession plan was decided back in May When you
Hmm.
brought in last year, when you brought in Darius Acup Jr. and by July he was committed to you. By November he could sign the early period. He's been the succession plan for over a year. So it's hard to. And then you've got DJ Wagner still in the college game, who's going to get a lot of minutes as a primary handler, splitting those dudes with Acup. At some point, you didn't have a place where that made sense, and that's why
Yeah.
I said all the other stuff. You need to, if you're going to enter into those things, it needs to make sense for everybody. I just don't think anyone saw that coming, that he was going to really, even when he declared that he was going to put his name in the portal on the last
Hmm.
day, that was thought of as just an off ramp, just a
Yep.
crazy scenario. Something happens and he may not feel good about his rappel. It was not a crazy scenario. I mean, it was pretty quickly. He accepts a combine invitation, Boogie. He goes to the combine. He lets them measure him. He lets them put him on the roster for the 5-on-5. He's like, nah, I'm good. I'm out. I'm going back to school. I mean, again, if his succession plan was well in place
Hmm.
for a year. So even if coming off the season, he was just going to test the waters, and you thought maybe that he really might come back. I don't know that would have been workable for Arkansas unless at that point you still hadn't sewn up DJ Wagner in your retention stuff, and then you had maybe a decision there. Who do you really pursue to keep? But I still think Calipari would have pursued DJ because the family ties and
Yep.
the loyalty that Calipari has. So at the end of the day, I said all that to say, as much as it hurts, you want me to keep it simple. You know I can't do that. I got to talk
Never.
about it. As much as it hurts to let a guy go and play for a league foe and maybe make him a power again, at the same time, it might have hurt even in a different way to scramble to retain that
Yeah.
when it was not part of your plans. You made promises for playing time things to players that it's not a bad succession plan at all.
Yeah.
Darius Acup Jr., just looking at him and what he's done up to this point, looks like the kind of guy that could be all league next year and do things like Trey Johnson did and like Jeremiah Fears did and like Boogie Flan was doing before he missed 15 games. That kind of all league kind of thing on top of, were you going to shelf that and partly shelf Boogie to try to get them both minutes? It's like the old thing where you talk about an NFL team with quarterbacks. If you've got more than one quarterback, you don't have a quarterback.
Yeah.
The other guys are supposed to be in case of an injury, not because you're going to run one guy out there for a couple of series and then another guy. You're not sure that you have anybody that rises above to win the job. That's a problem more than it is a luxury, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, it's the whole, you could pick your cliche, right? You could do that with
Yeah,
quarterbacks. You could do the, there's only one ball, right? Whatever you
yeah.
want. I mean, that's ultimately what it came down to, and just the timeline of everything. There just really wasn't a spot. It was a move that it made sense for Boogie. It just hurts, given that it's Florida and given that it's the defending national champs. I'll tell you something, Kevin. Prediction wise, folks like to just make storylines and rivalries out of nothing. It's why we love sports and all that stuff. I can tell you right now, we don't know the SEC schedule. We don't know if Arkansas will play Florida twice, once on the road, home, both, right? But people, if you're looking to make a story out of nothing, people are going to look forward to the Acuff Boogie Flan matchup, and they're not. It's going to be nothing between the two of them, but people are going to look forward to that just because of the way that
Oh
all
yeah.
this happened, and it's going to be fun. For Arkansas fans, you got to be excited about what you have in Acuff, and it's going to be special. But regardless, joining Florida, joining the defending national champs, that hurts big time. But before we go, we're going to talk a little bit of Pro Hogs. We're going to talk a little bit NBA playoffs. But first, another quick break. All right, back here closing up shop on the Hog Hoops Report. Kevin McPherson and Jacob Morris with you. Kevin, before we go, let's talk a little bit of Pro Hogs, a little bit of NBA playoffs. Unfortunately, we've seen it's really just the fellas on the Thunder now in terms of Pro Hogs. Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams, the last remaining Pro Hogs in the Eastern Conference and Western Conference Finals. But regardless, just at least for me, it's just been an absolute ball, this NBA postseason. It helps a little bit that I'm a Pacers fan, I'll tell you that. But
All right,
regardless, I
right.
think some really high-level basketball. It's been fun to watch so far.
It has. And you don't have the Lakers or the
Yeah,
Celtics now. The Knicks I'll say are, because they're still technically in it, are
they
kind of the
are.
last hope for the big mega market, right? And we're getting close to past tense territory, right? I mean, at least you want that. And the Pacers have been just an incredible storyline.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. Oklahoma City, the league's best record, one of the all-time greatest seasons when you look at record-wise, some of the standards they established with all that winning. Still the NBA's youngest team. Two impressive wins
Yeah.
in this most recent series, the Western Conference Finals against Minnesota, and then they get beat by 40 plus
Bad.
in Game 3 when the series shifted to Minnesota. And now all of a sudden you're pumping the brakes on anointing the Thunder
Hmm.
as the Western Conference. About to wrap that up and look forward to the finals. You got question marks now, and then all they have to do is win Game 4 in Minneapolis, and now you're probably got a gentleman sweep
Yeah.
on their way. But if Minnesota wins this next game, that's a crazy good series again. And OKC just went through 7 games against Denver. So we'll see what happens there. Indiana, oddly enough, has started 2-0 in every series.
Yeah.
I don't think. What do they have? Do they have more than 2 losses
No,
in these playoffs?
10-2 now. They're 4-1, gentlemen's
Right.
sweep in
So
round 1 and 2.
right. So you're. It's not. It's a different. It's a different storyline.
Yeah.
I think obviously in the Eastern Conference than anybody envisioned. Even though we know the Pacers, have done some good things recently in the playoffs. Maybe not quite at this level, right?
Hmm.
And not in a while. But it's interesting to me because is there really an identifiable superstar relative to some of these other teams that remain? And if you do pick one out, I guess it's Halliburton. But at the
Hmm.
same time, Pascal Siakam's been an all-star. I think he was an all-star again this season. You've got some really good players on that team. But the one thing I've noticed about the Pacers is the ball has a ton of energy, and they don't care who takes shots or
Yep.
get credit. No, but look, the Pro Hogs, you mentioned Isaiah Joe,
Yeah.
Jalen Williams, they both played in this last game. It was a blowout. Both of them have kind of been in and out of the lineup in terms of impacting the true two deep rotation. But they're making their contributions. But I do expect Oklahoma City to prevail. I thought uh, maybe going to that Pacers Knicks series that the NBA would try to find some way to get the Knicks into the finals. But the Pacers are having nothing to do with that. If there's anything unbalanced there, Pacers are having nothing to do with that. But there've been some really exciting games, obviously, because those games have been close as well.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, though, they got Scott Foster in Indianapolis tonight. He's known as the extender. He's going to extend that series a little bit. So I would assume the Knicks get it done tonight. But regardless, the Thunder have looked impressive, and the Pro Hogs. It's just an example of the depth of that OKC team, because both Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams would play significant roles for other teams. But when you have the type of talent that Thunder team does, it's hard to get on the floor. And it was cool to see. We talked about this, I think, 2 weeks ago. The way that Jalen Williams was used against Jokic, and how they threw him in, and he did a really good job defensively against the best player in the world. That was impressive, and fun to see those guys have success on Oklahoma City. 2-1 in that series, 2-0 Indy over New York. But that's all the time we have on this week's Hog Hoops Report. That is Kevin McPherson. I am Jacob Morris. We'll talk to you next week.